On this installment of Locked On Grizzlies, I break down Grizzlies Hawks. So many interesting angles to take. Youth was served in a tough late loss for Memphis. Losing in preseason doesn't matter. It's how you play the game. And there was lots to be optimistic about from the Memphis Grizzlies. Plus, we'll take a look ahead to the weekend. The Grizzlies heading to Miami. What is that going to look like? How can success be measured as this road trip preseason version continues? Stay with us. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is a Friday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you so much for being with me wherever you may be. I appreciate your time, your attention, your willingness to allow myself, Joe Mullinax, into your podcasting realm for this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Flying solo, I am on this day, on this Friday. DeMichael Cole focusing in on the day job over the commercial appeal, covering the Memphis Grizzlies as the beat writer for that publication. So you've got me, Joe Mullinax of Bluff City Media, of SB Nation every once in a while, and of course of Locked On Grizzlies to take you through some thoughts, some conversation about Grizzlies Hawks heading into Grizzlies Heat this coming Sunday. And as DeMichael and I talked about earlier in the week, the weird 2 games left in the preseason with like 10 or 11 days to go, how that's going to be handled. Things that'll be interesting to watch play out for 1,000. Alex. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Again, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. I am Joe Mullinax, your host for this edition of the show, and chances are you saw at least the result of Grizzlies Hawks. If you didn't, the Grizzlies lose 103-102 in a barn burner of a game. It was not that way the entire way. That's important to point out. The Hawks built a pretty impressive late first half lead. They were winning by, I believe, 9 at the half, roughly, give or take. And then the Grizzlies come storming back late. Again, in a preseason game, how much does the fourth quarter matter? Trae Young played in this game for the Atlanta Hawks. Other Hawks starters played in this game. Clint Capella, Devontae Murray. They had guys out there that were starters, but they only logged about 18 minutes. So this was much more of a game for players like Bruno Fernando, Kobe Buffkin, those types of younger players for the Hawks. And it was definitely that for the Grizzlies because the Grizzlies didn't really play anybody that is a starter for this team, except for Steven Adams, right? Steven Adams logs 15 minutes of playing time, gets back out there, looks pretty good in the run that he gets. But it was more about Santi Aldama as a starter. It was more about David Roddy. Jacob Gilyard, who obviously is a two-way player for the Grizzlies, is going to be with the Memphis Hustle more than he's going to be with the Memphis Grizzlies, the G League affiliate of the Grizzlies organization. But Gilyard got a lot of playing time, 31 minutes in the game. He actually led the Grizzlies in minutes. So we're not going to spend too much time breaking down the preseason result. It's cool to see the Grizzlies compete at the end, and we'll talk more about that as the episode goes on. But the fact that they lose, the fact that there are issues defensively, I don't expect Jacob Gilyard to be able to hang with Trae Young. I don't expect David Roddy, Zaire Williams, that particular starting backcourt to be some defensive marvel. That's not realistic. You're looking for signs of development. You're looking for signs of growth. And there's a lot to be optimistic about in that department. And again, we'll talk more about that later on in the show. But a big takeaway for me, okay, because this is a guy who hasn't been developed yet. And I think he will get developed. I don't want to say he's not going to. But later on in the show, we're going to talk about the value of the Grizzlies being patient, okay? Gigi Jackson is 18 years old. And he does not look like a 18-year-old basketball player. He looks like an NBA pro, an NBA rookie. That's important to point out. Not the most efficient NBA score. He was 9 of 23 in the game. He took 23 shots. The next closest Grizzly was Santi Aldama, who, again, we'll talk more about later on in the episode. But just watching G.G. Jackson and how fluid he was on the floor. Somebody his size, being able to handle the basketball the way that he does, he shouldn't be able to. And especially at that age of 18 years old, like this guy played a year of college basketball at South Carolina. He should have just graduated from high school. So he's such a unique situation in terms of his talent, in terms of what he still needs to find within himself to maximize it. And that really makes it really exciting that he doesn't have to be a Memphis Grizzly the whole season, right? Again, he's on a two-way contract, much like Gilliard, much like Kenneth Lofton Jr., or not Kenneth Lofton Jr., excuse me, much like Vince Williams Jr. Those guys are on two-way contracts, and they will have most of their season spent competing down at the G League. If there's ever a guy designed for the G League, it's G.G. Jackson, because G.G. Jackson can go and find his footing as a professional. He can go and mature, not just on the floor, but off of the floor. He can just focus on basketball and not have to worry about all of the extracurricular things that even at this day and age of college basketball might be associated with that level of play. If he was still at South Carolina and was the dude at South Carolina, the guy, he might have all this attention on him that maybe is going to be fully conducive to him developing into the type of player he wants to be. With the Memphis Grizzlies, he's one of many, right? And that's not to say that GG's not special. I watched the Grizzlies-Hawks game. I saw the fluidity of his movement. I saw the ability to handle the way that he did. His facilitation is a lot better than I think he gets credit for. Only one assist in this game, but still a really strong showing, getting to the basket off the bounce. There is potential and possibility there for him to really explode as an offensive weapon in particular. And given his frame, given his size, that's only going to continue to expand defensively as well. Again, he's roughly 6'9", 6'10". He is a combo forward type. He can play the three. He can play the four. He can do a lot of different things. And again, 18 years old, born in 2005. He was born in 2005. If that doesn't make you feel old, even if you're a kid listening to this podcast right now, if that doesn't make you feel old through me. Feel the bones creak and the backs ache and the knees squeak through your earbud, AirPod, computer screen to know that there's an 18-year-old that is in the NBA and has the capacity to do some of the things that we saw G.G. Jackson do on Thursday night. Really remarkable. So I was hesitant of the pick, right? I like to admit when I'm wrong. I think that's important. And I don't necessarily want to say I was wrong. I support my vision for what I wanted that pick to be, but obviously the Grizzlies had a different vision, and so far so good in terms of it being reinforced that they are still in the development stage in a lot of ways as an organization. We'll talk more about that here at a moment on the show. They obviously think they can develop G.G. Jackson into something, and he is absolutely a moldable ball of clay because you can't find guys that have that size, that have the capacity to get to the basket, to have the frame, to add the weight while maintaining athleticism. Those are things that you can't teach. Those are things that you can't teach. And that sucks to say because you have guys like Jacob Gilliard. If he was only 3 or 4 more inches taller, right? If only that guy was a little bit bigger because he's a good basketball player. He has great hands, great feel for the game. Really a remarkable knack as a defender creating steals. That is a strength of his. But he just doesn't have the size. He's not going to be able to be at the NBA level because of his limitations, what a G.G. Jackson could be. So the hesitancy with G.G. in terms of his attitude at South Carolina, it sounds like all that has been put in the background, put in the past. G.G. Jackson, a chance to develop. And he is, in my opinion, and I'm biased, obviously, but I think he is in the best place in the NBA to be developed as a basketball talent. The track record is getting ridiculous at this point. And we saw further evidence of that in the Grizzlies game with the Atlanta Hawks. Because again, G.G. Jackson just got here. The draft was 4 months ago. So G.G. Jackson hasn't been with the Grizzlies long enough to say he's a Grizzlies product. But there are guys who showed up and are showing out, not just this past Thursday, but overall in the training camp, in FIBA, that are standing, shining examples of what the Grizzlies developmental program is all about. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. It doesn't get much better than that. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, you really should consider finally just pulling and going all in with it in terms of giving it a shot. There's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options available, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. It's a blast. I highly recommend that you give it a try. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are talking the strength of the development system of the Grizzlies and why I need to talk myself into keeping the faith. We'll talk about that next. Stay with us here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, flying solo on this episode of the podcast. I appreciate you being here with me on this Friday edition of the show. Technically Thursday night, Friday, whenever you're checking it out. Post-Atlanta Memphis game episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Thank you for being with me as DeMichael finishes up finishing touches on his coverage for the commercial appeal. DeMichael will be back with me on Sunday night into Monday. Similar style and episode. We'll push that after Grizzlies Heat. Lots to discuss and lots to look ahead to, since the Grizzlies won't play again until the preseason finale on the following Friday. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. The development system. G.G. Jackson is not that yet. I thought he was the star of Grizzlies Hawks on Thursday night, but G.G. Jackson has only been around for 4 months. The development system of the Memphis Grizzlies is unparalleled in the National Basketball Association, in my opinion. And it was on display in this contest. And it starts with Santi Aldama, because Santi Aldama is a guy who a lot of folks incorrectly, I think it's important to stress, incorrectly see as lesser than Kenneth Lofton Jr., as a player whose defensive struggles are so far gone that he's not worth the offensive weapon that he could potentially be. And that is just a bad opinion. I'm sorry. If that's you, dear listener, dear viewer, I still love you. I hope you stick around and stay in every day or with Locked On Grizzlies, but you're just dead wrong. This is a guy who went out against the Atlanta Hawks. And again, preseason game, not coming on here to say that he should start instead of Steven Adams or anything like that, because that would be crazy. And he plays well next to Steven Adams because he doesn't have to do the things that Steven Adams is willing to do as a screener and rebounder. Not really a surprise that a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. has that same level of success when he plays. But I digress. Santi Aldama is a 3-level scorer. Santi Aldama has shown better facilitation and shot creation for others' chops. 6 assists. 6 assists against the Atlanta Hawks in 22 minutes played. 22 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. We saw in the Hawks-Grizzlies game on Thursday night glimpses of what Santi was for Team Spain. And the FIBA experience and watching Santi grow into the role of basically being the best player for Team Spain, again, that was, in my view, a testament to the development system of the Memphis Grizzlies, because Santi has been in Memphis for 2 years. Santi has been a part of that process. He's been a part of that system, gaining weight, working on his skills, having individual coaching from assistant coaches there in Memphis. He is the latest, maybe not the greatest, but the latest example of how that development system is significant. Zaire Williams, another strong performance from Zaire. Could have been better defensively, but in terms of his shooting, he made 4 out of 8 shots, and all of his makes were threes. So DeMichael and I come on here, and we talk about how they have to find ways in St. Andrews. DeMichael wrote about it over the commercial appeal. Yeah, letting Zaire take some pull-up jumpers from the mid-range. Let him get into a rhythm. Build around his strengths, which was not the case in last year's offensive sets. But he made 4 out of 7 3-point shots in this one. He is getting better. His body is changing. He is physically developing. You'll see that with G.G. Jackson over the next year or two, I'd imagine. David Roddy didn't shoot the ball particularly well, way too many turnovers on this night, but he rebounded well, 6 rebounds, attacking the glass, being a versatile defender, a true combo forward. And then you go to the bench. Kenneth Lofton Jr. didn't have it offensively. It wasn't his best scoring night, but he gave tremendous effort in that fourth quarter, trying to will the Grizzlies to a late victory. He did a tremendous job cleaning the glass when he had opportunities and putting forth that effort. Vince Williams Jr. as another 2-way contract guy. Not the most efficient scoring night, but he got to the charity stripe. He got to the free throw line. He grabbed rebounds, 9 rebounds, 9 boards as a wing player. I just went through several names of guys that have been in the Memphis system for at least a year that understand the way that the Grizzlies want to play basketball. And that matters a ton. It matters a lot because that identity, that willingness to do the things that it takes to play Memphis Grizzlies basketball and listen to coaching. Like that sounds like such of course they should listen to their coach. They're millionaires playing a kid's game. Theoretically, sure. But you've been following the NBA for a while, I'm guessing. Is that how it works with every NBA franchise? Absolutely not. And because of that, the fact that the Grizzlies have cultivated a culture where that is a priority, clearly because they keep doing it over and over again, where they are finding talent in places that you usually would not find talent, that gives me so much reason for faith and belief in the Grizzlies being a strong franchise, not just right now, but moving forward. Because things are going to get tight money-wise. I've talked about that. Michael has talked about that. It's only going to get worse financially for Memphis as these major money deals kick in. And because of that, they have to be able to develop guys in the G League. Because of that, they have to be able to get guys signed to long-term team-friendly deals that maybe aren't superstars, maybe aren't the OG Anunobys and Mikal Bridges of the world, but they are very good role players who accentuate the things that the Grizzlies stars do. And every name that I listed off, Zaire Williams is a big wing that can also create. David Roddy, a versatile forward. Even the 2-way guys on the 2-way contracts. Kenneth Lofton Jr., theoretically speaking, complements Jaren Jackson Jr. very well in terms of his skill set. Vince Williams Jr. has a 3-and-D potential wing. If he can start hitting those threes, do the Grizzlies need more size and length on the perimeter? I would say so. So I just really want to reiterate, because I've been hard on this Grizzlies front office before. I have been hard on them not looking to create the way that they should in terms of going to get the starting wing, not being willing to pull that trigger. Obviously, they did a little bit with the Marcus Smart deal, but you got to give credit where it's due. And right now, in my opinion, the credit is due to the Memphis Grizzlies for sticking with their vision, not rushing their timeline for anybody. Because there are so many good young players. Maybe they're not superstars. We didn't even mention Jake LaRavia, who didn't play in this game. John Conchar, who's had success. Another major development story for the Memphis Grizzlies. And then obviously you have Desmond Bane himself. Numerous guys on top of the ones that we went into detail about here that are homegrown talents that continue to find their footing within the systems and schemes of the Grizzlies. That matters a lot because you want to keep that continuity. You want to do it in a team-friendly financial way because Desmond Bane's about to have a max contract extension that kicks in. John Morant's contract extension is kicked in. And Jaren Jackson Jr. is due a pretty hefty pay raise in his own right here in the next couple of years. So that's 3 dudes that combined are going to probably make over $500 million together. The money's going to run dry in other areas. You're not going to be able to build this franchise through restricted free agency and unrestricted free agency and minimum signees. Memphis isn't the place for that. You got to do it through the draft. You got to do it through the G League. You got to develop. They have numerous examples of success. And I thought, Gigi Jackson, again, hasn't been around long enough to fall into that list, but I can't wait to see him be the latest example of getting better under the tutelage of Taylor Jenkins and his coaching staff. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we'll close out this episode of the show, taking a look at Sunday. I've got a few goals to talk about. Again, do I care if they beat the Miami Heat? Not really. It's a preseason game. Do I want them to do some things before the time comes? Absolutely. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, flying solo on this episode. No DeMichael Cole today. DeMichael is finishing up work over at the Commercial Appeal. DeMichael will be back with me on the Sunday edition of the podcast. We've been talking development. We've been talking young talent. Going into Sunday's game, because the Grizzlies don't play again until Sunday. Going into the game with the Miami Heat, here are some things that I want to see. Number one, I want to see Steven Adams play again. I don't want to see him get another night off. They're about to have lots of nights off. They play on Sunday, then they play on the Friday after that, 5 days later, and then they don't play again until the regular season starts. So for the next 2 weeks, basically, they have 2.5 basketball games, roughly, give or take. With that in mind, I want to see Steven Adams play. I want to see him get a little bit more run. I want to see him maybe try to play a few minutes in the second half, and then you take him out. I want to see expansion of his role. I want to see expansion of his time on the court. Let's test him a little bit more because he's going to have a long time to rest coming out of this game. Number two, I want Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. back out there, and I want them not necessarily a dress rehearsal, but what the Hawks did, 18 to 20 minutes, I think that's fine for those guys. I'd be okay with a little bit longer if that's what Taylor Jenkins wanted to go with. But again, they only have 2 games left. So at some point, you have to actually go through what a rotation might look like. That dress rehearsal aspect is so important. And usually, as DeMichael and I talked about on a recent episode, usually that's the second to last preseason game. But the Grizzlies' schedule is so strange. They literally have 2 preseason games left. One Sunday, one Friday. That's a big old gap. It's like they're playing high school football or something. A rain makeup game, that's a long time off for professional basketball. So how do you go about preparing yourself for a season that way? To me, Sunday should be the game that they go in a little bit more, but I want to see at least 18 to 20 minutes from Jaren and Bane. I'd love to see Marcus Smart. I'm not holding my breath. Not holding my breath. They're going to be hesitant. They're going to be patient. All of those things that DeMichael talks about, and he's right. They are going to take a deep breath, make sure that he's healthy. At the end of the day, they don't care about preseason basketball. They care about the regular season, and then, of course, even more than that, they care about the postseason. They want to make sure their ducks are in the proverbial row for that. Finally, I am fascinated by what we could potentially see from that starting wing competition. Because obviously, Marcus Smart's going to be a starter next to Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Steven Adams. And we talked about the starting wing thing up and down, left and right. The reason that I want to elaborate on wanting to see, again, if this is going to be the dress rehearsal, how they're going to handle it is because it's going to be a window into how Taylor Jenkins sees his team early on in the season. What do they need? Do they need floor spacing? Do they need shot creation? Do they need more room to operate offensively? Luke Kennard's your guy to start. Do they need a versatile two-way player potentially who has length, can create off the dribble, do some things for himself and others while being a good, strong front court defender next to Jaren and Adams? Then Zaire Williams is probably your guy, or maybe even a David Roddy. Where does Jake LaRavia fit in all of this? Is he the odd man out? Are you going to go with John Conchar, old White Rice himself, as I mentioned on a recent episode of the show? He does a good job letting other people be the best versions of themselves around him. So do you let him do that? Do you let him be that guy? I think you start getting more of a concrete answer as to what Taylor Jenkins sees his team needing and what he sees his team's identity being at this stage of the season, right before it begins. Who is he going to go with? I have no idea. I think I know who I would go with. I would give the run to Zaire Williams and continue to double down on your development. You've been right to this point. You've been correct. You've gotten just about every developmental piece right, not maybe exactly the way you want it, but these guys have gotten better. So why not double down with Zaire Williams and let him have that opportunity, rewarding him for working on the things that you have wanted him to work on throughout the preseason and the offseason. He's gotten bigger. You can tell his frame is filled out. You can see that he is handling the basketball better. He's being more decisive, whether he's making a pass or whether he's deciding to take a shot. He is being a more decisive weapon offensively. He has the defensive potential. That's been talked about here, there, and everywhere. I would go with Zaire. But the fascinating piece is you can make an argument for Conchar. You can make an argument for Roddy. You can make an argument for Kennard. Several names that I listed off there, all of those guys have legitimate claims to opportunity. Maybe not claims to the spot itself, but they have claims to the opportunity to try to go get the spot. So I want to see extended run for Steven Adams. I want to see Bane and Jaren more so in a actual game-like situation where they play an allotment of minutes comparable to that. Probably not going to see Marcus Smart, but I really am going to be honing in, even if it's not the starter. Like, again, they could name David Roddy the starter. He may not start on opening night. How the guys come in and play, how they fit with a Bane, with a Jaren Jackson Jr., a Steven Adams. How many sets are those guys getting alongside those starters or intertwined with those starters? Because between that and practice, which DeMichael obviously attends on a pretty regular basis, between those two things, you have a greater understanding of where Taylor Jenkins' thought process is going into the season. What does this team need? Who does he see this team being, especially with John Morant out? How are they going to win? What does he think is their best path to winning? That's a coach's job, right? Especially at the professional level. They found a way to develop, and they're going to continue to do that, I'm sure, both in season and through the G League. Reward the guy you've been developing. Give Zaire Williams that shot. I'll be interested to see whether it is as a starter in a preseason game or whether they just give him significant minutes again off the bench, how he mixes and mingles and intertwines with Jaren and Bane and Adams, assuming they play. That's what I'll be keeping an eye on heading in to Sunday's contest in Miami against the Heat. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is much appreciated, as always. Thanks for making us part of your Memphis Grizzlies and NBA content consumption each and every day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as over on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. And again, hopefully you'll be an everydayer checking us out each and every time that we have a podcast on Locked On Grizzlies on the Locked On Podcast Network. To Michael Cole, my partner, and I love doing the show, love doing it together, love doing it as part of this network. And hopefully you'll keep us along with you on your daily content consumption journey when it comes to the NBA and the Memphis Grizzlies in particular. Next time we see you, we'll recap Heat and Grizzlies. We will talk a little bit more about that starting wing competition, and we'll look ahead to an interesting week for the Grizzlies where they only have one preseason game, their final one Friday. So they'll have several days off. How DeMichael and I perceive the team handling that. All that and more on the next episode. Until then, thank you so much for checking us out each and every day on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. This is Locked On Grizzlies.